we are recording.
I'd like to welcome everybody to and call to order the November 17th, 2020 Port Orchard City Council Work Study Session. Pursuant to the Governor's stay-at-home, stay-safe order, the City Council will be conducting the meeting via Zoom this evening. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, I believe our first item is the draft downtown and county campus sub-area plan. Mr. Bond.
Yes, thank you. Tonight, Mitch Petacek, did I get that right, Mitch? All right, from GGLO is here, and he is going to be walking you through the preliminary draft downtown and county campus sub-area plan. And so I'll let him, I think we're going to do about a 25 or 30-minute presentation, and then we'll have time for some discussion and questions afterwards. One of the directions that we're looking for from the City Council tonight is that this study, we really looked at trying to hit the Psrc criteria to become a regional center. And what we have learned is that even with the additional growth that this plan shows, we're still not planning for quite high enough targets in order to meet the Psrc criteria. And so we need to make a decision of whether we're going to continue to pursue the Psrc designation, or because it would require so much more redevelopment than what is already shown in the plan, whether we are comfortable remaining a countywide center of growth. And so that'll be one of the things we want to discuss at the end here. But Mitch, I'll let you take it away. Do you have a presentation to share? You're muted.
I do. I'm going to bring that up now. Everybody see my screen? All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Nick, and thanks to everybody for having me on this evening. So I'm going to give just a high-level intro and kind of try to get through an overview, and then if you want to go back to any of the specific goals or policy recommendations in this initial draft, we can definitely go back to that. But I'm going to kind of try to get through much of this as I can first, and then we can go back to things as needed. So starting out, as Nick had mentioned, the existing centers designated in the existing comp plan, the downtown center and the county campus center. And if you hear any noises crying in the background, that's my newborn. So we'll try to just move through as much as we can. So one of the early things that we looked at is how does the existing designated centers relate to the Psrc requirements? That being a goal of the current comp plan is for these centers to be candidates as urban regional growth centers. And one thing we looked at originally is that the two centers are only about 120 acres combined, where the regional growth center requires at least 200 up to 640 acres. So that was one of the first things we originally looked at. Some of the other requirements to be a regional growth center are that it has 18 existing activity units, and we're planning for at least 45 activity units. Activity units, for those that might know, is really just a combination of housing units and jobs divided by the acreage of land. And then we met with Psrc and with consultation with Psrc and city staff, we essentially came up with a few different scenarios that would get us to the area requirements and trying to capture where we thought development might occur and where we might capture the most activity units prior to getting into the full study of the parcels in the land. And that's what you see here is kind of the different study options we considered. PSRC had kind of recommended that, you know, it's best at this point to look at a broader brush stroke to the study area, and that if the city does go in with an application in the future based on the sub-area plan, it's easier to defend a reduction in the study area than try to expand the study area for an application to an area that wasn't studied. So that said, we ended up on the study area. If you can see this in red here, I'm following with my line. The outline, it's about 329 acres, and it encompasses the existing county campus and the existing downtown campus. And we'll discuss these other colors a little bit later in the slides. But what you're seeing down here at the bottom highlighted in red then is the existing population within this larger boundary, about 1,800 residents, almost 2,200 jobs, again, the 329 acres, and the existing activity units is only at 12 in the existing condition. So where will the development occur within the sub-area plan was one of the first initial tasks we looked at, and we leaned a lot on this report that was sent out previously, conducted by Heartland. And what we did is we looked at each of the parcels within the area and determined what are the existing gross developable lands, or what's our capacity for development. And that really looked at primarily three things. What's the vacant land, what's underutilized land, and that was really the ratio of improvement to the cost of the land value, looking at assessor's data for the some 780-ish parcels, I believe, in the study area. And then the other is looking at where is there single family homes within larger density allowable zones. From there, it was adjusted based on critical areas, future anticipated road right-of-ways or driveways, and small percentage that was assumed just would not be developed within this planning horizon timeline to 2040. From there, we arrived at essentially a square footage of land that was assumed to be our net developable land where that future development may occur. And that's what you're seeing on this image on the left here. And again, you can see the underutilized, vacant, single family in higher density, and then vacant and redevelopable. We also worked with the city to incorporate some planned pipeline development of projects that we knew were in the works. For instance, the proposed mixed-use development that Sound West Group had proposed, along with Kitsap Bank, and a few other, and the county campus expansion, for example. The image you're seeing on the right here, I'll get back to more towards the end of the discussion, but that's really looking at our new proposed buildable lands based on policy recommendations and goals of the new sub-area. So moving on from there, part of the sub-area plan is we are also including programmatic EIS to look at the environmental impacts of this proposed new development, and the three proposed alternatives that are being considered take more of a programmatic approach to this development. This is due in part to the uncertain scope of future development, also the large study area of the boundary. And the three alternatives being considered, alternative one, the no action alternative, essentially doesn't assume that no development will occur, but rather that development will occur outside of the proposed policies included within the sub-area plan, and that would most likely occur similar to the existing conditions within the study area, largely more single-use development with largely surface parking. And then the two alternatives being considered are alternative 2, which is a residential focus, which includes higher percentage of residential and most of the commercial occurring in standalone commercial development with a higher percentage of surface parking than the alternative 3. Alternative 3 is assuming a little bit greater structured parking overall, and it's also assuming more mixed-use development within the study area. So, for instance, ground level retail commercial uses with office and residential above. So starting out looking at those, at the redevelopment areas, we generally broke them down somewhat based on the existing centers, but also on the buildable lands analysis map and the geographic conditions of the downtown. And so starting out the west downtown area, some of the big goals that we're proposing for this area is one, Bay Street corridor plan to identify proposed frontage design and streetscape standards for future development that would occur along Bay Street within the entirety of the study area from Port Orchard Boulevard through to the end of the West Bay Center. And also recommendations for the existing marquee in the historic downtown area. Additionally, how can we better activate the waterfront? In many ways, the development right now turns its front face to Bay Street and its back to the waterfront. And how can we propose development patterns that allow the Sinclair Inlet to be more of a front door for the city? And also, how do we better improve connections to the waterfront, including pedestrian connections from Bay Street, uphill neighborhoods, Prospect Street down to the waterfront. So some of the items you're seeing in this plan here is, one is proposing for Port and Orchard Street to transform from existing short streets that primarily serve as parking to be pedestrian plazas that create a connection from Bay Street directly to the waterfront. Part of Orchard Street's already being occupied by the existing lift station, which is being expanded and replaced as part of another plan. And then for each of the streets along the waterfront to terminate in some type of viewpoint that overlooks the waterfront. Another key aspect in this plan is the introduction of a new waterfront street that would run from Harrison to Frederick. And this would be more of a slow shared street, but then it would provide some on-street parking with angle parking along the waterfront as currently exists, and parallel parking on the south side, but it would again provide that front door for new development to look out on the bay onto Sinclair Inlet and allow for storefronts, waterfront dining, and such activities to occur. One of the elements just note in this plan here, as you can see, these dark lines are the suggested building fronts or primary frontages, and then the colors designating suggested potential uses, with much of the new development being some type of medium density residential, staying within the existing, generally within the existing zoning code allowable and height restrictions allowable within this study area. And then just the last point I'd note on this image here is just looking again, as there's a lot of parcels along the intersection of Bay Street and Port Orchard Boulevard. Sorry, I heard a beep. I didn't know if that was maybe somebody joining. That were identified as potential developable lands, and designating those parcels to be gateway signature developments as you enter into the historic downtown. In this plan, it's just a more detailed, zoomed in area looking at what that new shared street would look like as you go from Harrison to Sydney and Frederick. Frederick is proposed to transform back to a two-way street, as it would now become the primary access point into the existing marina parking lot, which we've shown is slightly reconfigured mostly to accommodate the new lift station, and then Orchard Avenue and Port Street being those pedestrian plazas. And the goal of working with WashDOT at what are some options for potential traffic calming within this area in order to allow for better, safer street crossings from the one side of Bay Street to the waterfront side. Another item that you're seeing in more detail here is a suggestion of a hill climb. And we left the goal a little bit open that it would align with either Port Street or Orchard Street, but this idea to provide pedestrian connection from Bay Street and the waterfront back up to Prospect Avenue. And also the idea of the alignment on Prospect Street is it actually aligns with prominent summit in the Olympic Mountains, in that the development would frame that view corridor. Excuse me. Looking at the East Downtown, broad goals here, looking at how can new development work to encourage finer grained development scale that's more pedestrian oriented versus much of the development now, which is focused towards automobile users and big box type development. So within the existing west side of Blackjack Creek, you see the suggestion of a loop street, which again provides public access and views to the water. And it's really kind of a waterfront planning 101, looking at how do we orient buildings perpendicular to the water so more users get views to the water. We still create that frontage along Bay Street. And then in the center of that loop street, suggesting a small park space or a paseo that would provide that pedestrian circulation and a frontage for that for these buildings. Either side of Blackjack Creek, where there's at a Turner Park to the east side and the west side, there's actually both these parcels are owned by the city, with the western parcel being used as parking for the existing Ford dealership, and mostly in a paved condition right now, and looking to have those spaces work with one another to frame the view out to Sinclair Inlet, and suggesting more of a natural waterfront landscape along each side of Blackjack Creek's outflow, and suggesting more of a residential development that would face that frontage. Looking at then the West Bay site, suggesting that Mitchell Street, which is a significant corridor within the city, continue and extend to terminate at a small waterfront plaza, and that new development within this site, again, hold that frontage along Bay Street, but then be arranged to encourage views out to the water, both of visitors, but then of building users as well. Again, with that perpendicular orientation of the water. Just a couple slides here I'd thrown in that weren't in the study area package, looking at some other developments. And of course, these aren't necessarily the scale of development that we would be seeing within the site. Just put that disclaimer out there. But again, looking at how building forms are used to suggest towards orienting the views to the waterfront. So across the way in Bremerton, this is a project up in North Vancouver, does a lot of the same. And then this riverfront kind of project down at the bottom is maybe more the scale of what you might see along potentially this area of the site. Looking at 2 to 3 stories of development and potential townhomes that would stay within the existing view protection corridor, which is required for much of these uphill sites. And then just some suggested imagery, Preston imagery of what the outfall of Blackjack Creek might look like. Again, looking at more of a potentially more of a natural type landscape with the idea of potential boardwalks along the waterfront, and then in front of the buildings you would have more traditional stoops and building entries that all are anchored looking at that view. For the county government campus, there isn't a lot of land that was included within the capacity analysis in this area. And what we're really striving to do with the goals of the sub-area plan is to support the planned expansion of the county government campus as a strong job center for the area, and then encourage for some new development along the Sydney and Klein corridors, consistent with the comp plan, that new development does occur along existing corridors, but then also have that development act as somewhat of a transition or buffer between the larger scale development at the county campus and the stable single family neighborhoods further to the east and west from there. And really, how do you have new development while also trying to preserve some of those stable single family neighborhoods? So looking at some of the land use suggestions, first on the right here, we're looking, this is the proposed adjusted centers map. And so adjusting the county campus center to include more of that proposed developable lands, and also plan not just for the center of the streets, but the way that you actually experience neighborhoods is both sides of the street at once here. And so capturing either side of Sydney and Klein Avenue as part of the planned center area. And then largely in the east downtown, much of the proposed development lands are along the Bethel corridor and the south side of the Kitsap High School. And so incorporating that portion of the study area within the center as well. And again, you're seeing a couple more precedent images of the scale of proposed development that might be included within the plan. Suggested frontage revisions, expanding some frontage requirements from the existing land use code, extend from Sydney corridor, which is a portion of it doesn't have frontage requirements and a portion of it is landscaped, and allowing for a more varied frontage requirements along that entire Sydney corridor. And then a similar case, extending the frontage requirements on Mitchell Street and down to the waterfront, as you see here. The proposed new Loop Street and Waterfront Street in the East Downtown. And then proposing for Bay Street to have more of the same character of development, from going from a marine frontage to a varied frontage along Bay Street, which would require essentially a larger portion of the street frontage to be held by building development. We did include some minor proposed suggestions to land use changes. And again, that was to reinforce the Klein and Sydney Avenue corridors. And so what you see here dashed that are dashed, those are the parcels that are suggested for changes to the land use. And so going from, right now there's pockets of neighborhood mixed use along Sydney and Klein, and just going to more strongly reinforce those corridors, proposing neighborhood mixed use along the extents of each side. And again, neighborhood mixed use still allows for single family zoning, which exists in much of the area, but it also does allow for small scale commercial as well. And that's what you can see. Much of the parcels are already, that already exists along many of the parcels across from the Kitsap County campus, and wanting for there to be more of a transition from that tall, high scale development of the county government campus, transitioning to the more single family neighborhoods away from Sydney and Klein. And then at the East Downtown, proposing from heavy commercial to commercial mixed use at the existing Kitsap Ford, and then Gateway mixed use along the Bethel Avenue corridor. The couple places we've heard from the public a lot of concerns about maintaining existing view corridors to the waterfront and ensuring that development not inhibit those views. And so the only places we've really proposed any changes in height is along Bethel Avenue and Mile High Road, where suggesting that the downtown height overlay district 5 extended into those areas. These are areas where there's an existing ravine along Bethel Avenue, where there's already significant grade change, which would minimize any impacts of the taller buildings along Bethel and not obstruct views to the waterfront. Same thing for the existing, the former RV dealership along Bay Street. It backs up against the existing steep terrain, such that views from above would not be impacted from the 5-story development. That's really the only going, much of this zoning is taking the from 50 feet to 58 feet. And so again, it's still a fairly incremental change in allowable height. And then lastly, just looking again here at the existing buildable, net buildable lands map and the proposed. And what the proposed is doing here is taking those height and zoning changes, and incorporating the parcels that you see in red here, are the parcels that would then become part of the assumed buildable capacity because of that zone change. So you can see some along Sydney as well as along the waterfront. And then between Harrison and Frederick Street, two of these parcels were already included because they have a vacant land and a vacant building, but including the rest of that block as potential redevelopment after the creation of that new waterfront street, assuming they might get redeveloped in response to that. At about time there, Nick, and thought this would be a good stopping point and allow for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have much to add to Mitch's presentation, but I will let the council members take it away with comments or questions.
Go ahead, folks.
Could you turn back to page 71? I don't have a header on. It's, yeah, that map on the right.
Yep.
Okay, a couple things struck me about this map. I understand the need to, as you say, buffer the height of the county campus buildings against the single family dwellings. I am concerned about the expansion of the county campus area west on Klein and east on Sydney, because you may not be aware, but that area there that you're suggesting for up development has a lot of the historic homes in town. And so it'd be really ironic if we're protecting the single family houses on the right from the, the overwhelming architecture of the county. And I think it was this map that also made me realize that the county should not be encroaching on the city so much. They should be an employer. They should not go so far. And I realize you didn't make the boundaries here. It looks like it stops at Kitsap Street between the Purple and West Downtown. But that boundary gave me a lot of heartburn because that is a prime residential area. It could be area that is also, I know that property tax is not a concern of everyone because we get more of our revenue from sales tax, but we would potentially, if all that purple area became county grounds, we would be potentially removing property from providing property tax. And as a resident of Sydney Avenue, as a disclaimer, I have seen the county take lots of houses along Sydney already as they intend to build a surface parking lot along Sydney down to Smith Street. So I'm not really impressed with the way that the county is using the lands that they've been apportioned. So the idea that we would expand something that we're calling the county campus is just giving me a great deal of heartburn.
And Councilmember Chang, I think that the county campus label we really meant to divide the center into 3 areas based on topography, not based on who's using the land. And so I think this is an issue of we've labeled this county campus, but the county's actual footprint is much smaller than the purple area. We're just calling the area the county campus, and so perhaps we need to call it by a different name.
Yeah, and some part of that comes from the existing comp plan where I think it's identified as the county government campus center, something along that line. And so the existing county campus is not planned to expand, but rather the study, the center as identified in the comprehensive plan is expanding, not the actual county campus.
So this is Scott. I would support a second look at how we label that and also how we show what we're currently calling the county campus and how that extends down the hill to the north. And it seems like a better break would be a little further to the south than it's currently shown, like I think Fred is referencing.
Maybe Dwight Street, if not Division.
I think Dwight makes sense to separate downtown.
Yeah. And also just north of Dwight Street on the corner is I think a parking lot that the county uses. So, but Dwight Street might be a good logical break.
Councilmember Cucciardi, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, Nick, I was just going to go back to your opening comment as it relates to the PRSC or, do you want to just kind of PSRC, I'm sorry, just kind of talk about the pros and cons of what that would look like and kind of what you're looking us to weigh in on?
Yeah, so I think somewhere in the plan, and it's going to take me a minute to scroll to that page because I'm viewing it in a browser. It talks about the 3 alternatives and what the planned, under this plan, what alternative 1, 2, and 3 look like in terms of planned activity units. And so the highest of the alternatives is alternative 3. I believe it's 26 activity units per acre. And we're currently, I think, depending on where you draw the boundaries, anywhere from 12 to 18 activity units per acre. So this plan, what we've realized is a lot of this is redevelopment. And so there are existing activity units and there's a net increase, but there's enough existing activity units in place. We're not increasing the activity unit that significantly. And I believe that we have to plan for 45 activity units per acre over an area that's at least 160 acres in area. And so to get there, we would have to either have significantly more height or be upzoning significantly more area or showing some of this redevelopment in more areas of the city. And based on the comments that I've heard about preserving the existing residential neighborhoods, I just don't know that there's support from the community or from the city council to do that.
Right.
Councilmember Ashby.
Sorry, I lost some network access for a bit, but I believe this is the table you're referring to, Nick. And as you see here, each of the alternatives, we're looking in the range of planned activity units, more in the mid-20s. And so it's a significant jump to get to that 45 activity unit number. And our discussions with Nick and city staff, it seems as though there's not public support to go to the type and scale of development that would be required to get that,
Seems like a non-starter.
Yeah,
Right.
and to elaborate on that, go ahead.
What I would add is I don't see a need to become a regional center. One of the conversations with that is that we would be more likely to get regional transportation funding. And I do not think that that would happen. I think designating this as a countywide center is appropriate for us. We looked at this actually back in about 2009, and council at that point rejected the idea of trying to become a regional center for some of the reasons that Nick brought up, is because of the required density. And I don't see advantages. I don't see there being value of being a regional center.
Right. And so what I was going to add to that is PSRC has a minimum existing activity unit number to be considered as a regional center, as well as a planning target. And so when we were considering, well, we're close to meeting the existing number, because I think we started out at, it's showing right now that it's 12 units per acre, but that's because we've expanded the boundary so much to include up Mitchell towards the high school. But when we originally measured the activity units, we were closer, I think, to 18 activity units per acre. So we were seen as being close to the intensity to meet the standards. But once you add the planning targets to that, it really transforms Port Orchard. And I think that's probably something that we don't have support for at this time.
Nope. Yeah, I don't like this.
So one other thing I wanted to mention in terms of implementation, I think Mitch touched on a couple of points about some zoning changes along Bethel to allow a little bit more height in those areas. But I think another thing that we're looking at is we're updating the parks plan at this time, and we've identified all of these plazas at every street that terminates in the water, is trying to transform that into more of a pedestrian space and providing access to the waterfront. And so this is an issue where if council is supportive of that idea, I need to make sure that I'm building those projects into our park impact fee, because that way new development is actually helping to pay for some of the redevelopment of the waterfront downtown to create these spaces. And then likewise, the transportation projects, we're talking about block frontages and doing some non-motorized improvements on Bay Street. And so I believe that is a project, and we're going to have to do this next year, but it can't be part of our traffic impact fee now. But I think we should consider putting some of the transportation pieces of this into the city's traffic impact fee, so that the traffic impact fee can also help fund some of this as this development is occurring. Those projects are actually helping pay for these improvements downtown. So I want to make sure that council is comfortable with that as an implementation step once we get this plan adopted.
So if we don't care for some of these boundaries, are they going to be adjusted in the plan? Or where are we at with this right now? You're asking us to decide on these options. What if we don't like any of them?
Well, so where we're at right now is this is a preliminary draft plan. So we are going to be releasing this to the public and doing some additional outreach. And there's going to be a hearing, I think, on the plan, or at least an opportunity for public participation in January. Is that right, Mitch? I don't have my schedule in front of me. And so there is absolutely an opportunity to make changes. But when we talk about the alternatives are really looking at, are we going with more of a balanced approach where there's additional employers and commercial jobs space created in Port Orchard, or are we leaning more towards residential development to help bring the critical mass of people downtown to support a thriving commercial district 7 days a week? And so the alternatives that we're looking at are really, are we aiming for this balanced mixed use approach, or are we looking at a residential focus?
So
And
Nick,
all of the plans are conceptual. I don't think that any of the building footprints will look exactly like this. We're just trying to communicate the areas where redevelopment is possible and kind of how building footprints will work. I think the piece along the waterfront between Harrison and Orchard Street, though, is really critical because those are things we're working on right now at the community center. And really changing our downtown so that you can actually sit on the sidewalk in front of a business and eat outside on the water side of a building is a transformational change that I think we're probably closer to the mark in that west downtown area compared to the other areas, which are much more conceptual right now.
Mhm.
So Nick, just real quickly, when we talk about, that there be proposed zoning change, there really wouldn't be anything that would require any action. It's more of a thought process. So this would be the direction we want to go as a.
Well, when we adopt the sub-area plan, we would the campus area. Mitch, back to hearing or are proposed to occur. So it's mainly the Bethel corridor where he's got these cross-hatched areas where we've got some commercial heavy where the gas station is and where the car dealership is, and we're proposing to change those. And by the way, we have met with Mr. Titus about this, and he said point blank he totally understands that the highest and best use of that property is not for selling automobiles, and that he's interested in moving to another. So he's supportive of the zoning changes in that part of downtown.
Thank you.
The other piece of this that I think is potentially going to be really a hot button issue with the public is parking, as it always is. And so with that development between Harrison and Frederick Street, some of the existing parking where we currently have 2 rows is going to become more of a street with 1 row of diagonal and then a row of parallel parking. And that's partially offset by the proposed structured parking at the site where the stair climb is across from City Hall. But it's also, I think, part of the mitigation has to do with Kitsap Transit and the existing more long-term parking for all-day parking would be available for a different type of parking. And so I think that's part of this conversation, and the timing of how those changes actually occur is really going to depend on the pace of development and also the presence of new park and ride facilities elsewhere in the city.
A question I have is not the west side of town, but we've had several studies before, several plans. But on the west side of town, with the map that's up right now, we know that there's a potential for implementation of this on that section. When we go to the east side of town, we're completely offering an idea that the Titus site would be used completely differently than it is now, and also the West Bay Shopping Center site. So my question is, do we really feel that there will be movement in those areas? I mean, will there be do we believe that the plan will actually be implemented?
Well, I would answer that, I guess, in 2 parts. First of all, the proposed planned action EIS is going to complete the environmental review for the first, I'm not sure whether it's 1,200 units of housing and 500,000 square feet of commercial space, but we're going to pre-approve under SEPA a certain level of development. And so it's going to be available on a first come, first served basis. And once the growth that has been allowed per the EIS has been exhausted, anybody who comes in after that has to go through the process that we have in place today or what east we're still in dealership. And that is for and development. I move the concept and is going. The redevelopment is more costly because you have are fairly, some are more successful than others, but there are a lot of businesses there that have to be relocated versus you have several vacant pieces of property or looking to sort of reimagine their facility.
Hey, Nick, how much space is Titus leasing from the city on the west side of Blackjack?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's about, it's probably 60 or 80 feet wide, although some of that may be the armoring that goes down to the creeks. So I'm not sure how much is upland versus how much might be unusable. And it's probably 400 feet long.
And is it
a couple the county's website, so I'll have an answer for you here soon.
I think I would just add one more point to your earlier comment about the the east area downtown. There are a couple parcels, specifically I'm forgetting the name of the parcel off the top of my head, but across from the gas station.
100 Bethel.
Yeah, so that's a property that is potential for development in the near term. But just the other point here too is just to reframe all of ourselves that we're talking about analyzing this from a to a 2040 horizon. The redevelopment be in the next 20 years.
So I was going to say at this point in time, I was wondering if there's other comments from the council members, and then Nick, I was going to let you summarize and say what are the next steps.
Well, I'll answer Scott's question first. It's a little over half an acre that we lease to Titus. And that's not including the easement that we have or the portion that's occupied by the trail. In terms of next steps, I think the thing for you to do is I would read through this carefully. And if you have comments or concerns, please send those to Carrie and I so that we can talk to the consultant about that or bring them up with the entire group. I think it will be good to sort of address your concerns going into the public process, or at least have an idea of what those look like so that we can come up with solutions or alternatives if needed. And then we're getting set to release the preliminary or the draft EIS for this as well. And so that's going to start the SEPA comment period on the EIS. And then, like I said, it'll come forward to you again in January, including the public participation part of this. And then because this is a grant funded project, we have to have this project totally complete by June 30th of next year. But that means that most of Mitch's work needs to be done in March or probably no later than April 1st. Which is what's in our grant agreement, although Commerce, because of COVID, has given us a little bit of flexibility there. So things will move pretty fast after the first of the year, and it's important to study this between now and January.
So Nick, at Land Use Committee, I recall that we were asking people to really focus on the goals and policies that have been proposed. Will we be looking at or talking about those goals and policies specifically, or are you looking for us to get you individual comments on goals and policies?
I think individual comments on goals and policies, I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And we are specifically mentioning things like areas that are proposed for rezoning. And we talk about those issues. And we also talk about creating parks at the end of all all streets that terminate at the water. So make sure, I think it's section 3 of the draft plan. Most of your time.
Councilmember Clausen, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick question, Nick. Could you describe the public process that's involved?
So going back to, I guess last March when we kicked the project off, obviously coronavirus happened, and so we had to move to more of an online format. And so we did, we sent mailers and reached out to everyone. We had an online survey. We're getting set to do a notice that the preliminary draft plan is available. And so we want to put this on the website and get it out to the public so that the public has a good month and a half to look at it and provide comments on it. And then there's also a parallel SEPA process where we had a scoping notice where we told the public that we're beginning to scope an EIS and please help us identify what the alternative should look like. And so then based on those comments, we have put together a preliminary draft EIS, which is about to be released as well.
To this point?
We've had a fair amount. I don't remember the total turnout for the survey. It certainly wasn't as good as what's happening with the community event center, where we have, the library, because it has such an active user base. I think people are really interested in that in a way that they don't get as excited for planning development. But I think we had probably a pretty average turnout for this. I would guess 100 or so responses.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Diener, you have your hand raised again?
Yeah, I've gone through the goals and policies, and for me, it's hard to visualize all of these. One thing is and within a reasonable distance for a lot of air traffic downtown, and people are having to park up the hill and along certain side streets now because of the popularity of the ramp on certain days. So that's something that I think we should not be forgetting about.
Again, as Nick said, I would encourage everybody to put their comments and emails in writing and send them in. Good discussion.
This is
Yep,
a kind of a
Billy, go
difficult
ahead.
time for the public to be weighing in on something that I consider to be extremely important. Given the COVID, the new restrictions, the holidays, the unemployment, I am really uncomfortable with this needing to go through with as little input as 100 people. And I understand this June 30th deadline, but I remember reading recently at least 2 emails where somebody asked if we were slipping things through, taking advantage of the situation. And boy, I just, I'm talking about some of this. It is a lot to absorb. Scott, this isn't that far out. I think 20 years is, hey, we will start to see some changes really soon. Nick, I understand why we would really need to move forward with the area right downtown, given the building that's going to be taking place soon. And I'm just telling you, I don't know that the public will respond yet, because don't you think that there's an awful lot that they have to think about? And a sub-area plan is going to be something, and they say, you know what, I'm just going to try to figure out how we're going to get through the holidays and buy Christmas presents or whatever it is, and the jobs. So anyway, I'm just telling you, I feel very uncomfortable with it. Fred, I know that you're there with me, and I'll go through it. I'm going to spend a lot more time looking at this. I'm just telling you, I don't think it's a good time for the public.
Yeah, I understand. Originally planned our public outreach, we were having open houses and in-person type meetings. Commerce has not, this would actually have to be extended by the legislature, and so the legislature has not granted these sorts of extensions. The Commerce grant is paying for about 25% of the cost of the project, and so, I suppose the other alternative would be that the city would not accept the Commerce money and then extend the project so that additional outreach could take place. So that's really the only alternative to trying to meet the deadline. Another alternative could potentially be can be full of rather than redevelop. Alternative to the current
Place, for example, circulation. It talks about vacating a right of way, and I want to make sure I understand what that means. We're not really talking about vacating a right of way in the traditional sense that it would be deeded to the adjacent property owner, so much as we're talking about converting its use into a public enjoyment of some sort. And so, unless I'm wrong, I think we need to remind ourselves that when we're looking at vacations, it's for a public enjoyment. Is or question, I guess.
That one specifically refers to not the public plazas at Port and Orchard Street between portion
proper. That's what the council would like. Absolutely.
I think I would like that. And I also want to make sure that we can, I know we may be stuck with this process for a while, and who knows when we'll be able to return to normal life, but I do share concerns about making sure this is as robust a public process as possible.
All right. Any further comments? Councilmember Clausen.
Yeah, just a couple. One is, I think, having a list of comments, regardless of where they originated, would be helpful. And secondly, I totally agree that we need to take the extra steps to make sure that the community is aware of what we're doing. So if we
John, I agree with that. And I think it maybe should even be a broader range than just the affected properties downtown, because this is our downtown core. And I believe it impacts all of the city of Port Orchard, if not South Kitsap. I'm wondering how we can tap into the same networks that the library has. Or the group, I can't remember their name now, that's doing the outreach for the community center activity, because they seem to have gotten a good response. So how could we possibly tap into that network?
Yeah, I actually have the email address list for that group, so we could certainly do an email blast, and I can work with Ryan, who's hands to set up that we would add some graphics to, as Fred mentioned, to make sure that people understand the area we're talking about.
We should be able to post it out or boost it out over our social channels, as well as maybe have very
How much time do you be doing this?
I think this will be on the work study agenda for January. And then I would imagine, I can't remember if the public meeting, I don't have the calendar in front of me.
Into the new year, correct?
Sorry, Councilmember Diener.
So then, as I was looking through the goals and the policies, it occurred to me that there are so many competing projects and visions that it might be a worthwhile exercise at some point to look at how we prioritize these. I know that that doesn't need to be done for the sub-area plan necessarily, but it could. But at the same time, we need to think about some of these and how we can do some of these that are more important than some of the others.
And the next topic is stormwater presentation. Mr. Dorsey.
Yes, I guess Zach's we did a presentation to the utility committee last month. I think Zach's gonna try to get us back on track a little bit by ramping through. So if we could hold questions until the end, that would be awesome. So Zach, are you driving at this point?
Yeah, I'm attempting to see if I can share my screen here.
Who's giving you authority?
Excellent question.
Is Brandy giving you authority?
Yes, I just gave it to him.
Okay, let's see. Right. My name is Eddie, and it's about events. So, our current EPS permit, non-elimination. So I've already conducted several of these. Our original permit was issued in 2009, and every iteration that we've received has had some changes over time. For the one that was issued in 2019, this is a summary of the upcoming stuff that we're working on currently. Our code evaluation updates for construction site runoff should be done and completed by the end of this year. The code sections are in process of evaluation as well. Minor comments have been identified so far. The 2013 and 18 permit cycle, ecology wants us to, let's do March 31st and is well underway. We do have upcoming receiving water assessments that we have to do under our new permit. These are intended to have basically, it's completed by or before the deadline of the permit. The assessment is for aiding in determination of priority watersheds and receiving waters for stormwater management action planning, which is a new component. The action due until 2023. We have to do one for each of our basins. The first basin we're going to be doing is the Blackjack Creek Basin. We're going to be prioritizing all of our watersheds by June 30th of 2022 in an order of importance for when to implement the stormwater management action plans. In addition to that, we have to implement a program for management, inspection, and enforcement of local business and private property pollution management. This currently is a little outside of the scope of our program, so we have budgeted to hire a third-party consultant to aid with these field inspections and development of that program. It's budgeted in 2021 and 2022 and will most likely extend into 23 and 24 budget cycle unless an alternative method is established. All enforcement components of this program will be borne by DCD and Public Works. We also have another follow-up watershed protection assessment done for this current permit cycle, but that's not due until January 1st of 2023. So all private mapping of our interties to the cities is also due August 1st of 2023, and we are well underway with that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done in 2020 for maintenance and other activities required by the permit. So in 2020, we have currently cleaned 952 swales within the city. Of these, 16 of them required maintenance. We successfully maintained and updated as needed 324 feet of ditch lines. Normal operations this year were kind of thrown into a turmoil because of this whole coronavirus. So instead of hiring private contractors to come in and do our catch basin maintenance, we actually employed city staff to do it ourselves in-house. During our maintenance and inspection cycles for 2020, we identified 12 catch basins that were in need of repair, and 3 ponds were found in need of minor repairs. In 2020, nothing showed a significant need of repair. I'm going to move on to our construction inspection program. In 2020, as of September, we have inspected 554 sites for different varying permit-related activities, either land disturbing or utility and erosion related. The implementation of our drone program has significantly increased our efficiencies with inspections and reporting for enforcement purposes. Of 136 permitted active development projects in 2020, 15 were land disturbing permits and 121 were building or utility permits. Of these, we have only had 2 with compliance issues in 2020. For our illicit connection investigation and illicit discharge detection and elimination program, plus our spill response program, we are currently in compliance for 2020 with all of our outfall and illicit connection screening program requirements. We have continued staff training for identifying IDDEs and basically how to triage the situation. Usually it results in a call to staff for depending upon the level of importance or effect. We've quickly located and managed local and multi-jurisdictional spill response efforts. Within 2020, we had less than 35 combined reports so far. We still have some time until the end of the year though. We will be upgrading to our new illicit connection and illicit discharge detection and elimination manual in 2021. Fairly minor changes to that from the previous, but still changes that we plan to incorporate. For our mapping and features inventory component, we continue updating our GIS database with new assets as development continues, and to update features data, pipe size, materials, conditions, etc. every time we do an inspection on these sites. So anytime we're peeking into these things, we're checking on this schedule. Educate reporting, a little bit of out, but and we still by this permit. Our plan that we submit every year is an updated report to Ecology, which outlines our compliance plans for the upcoming year. So when we submit this in March, it will be for 2021. This differs a little from a comprehensive plan, which is a planning document that is periodically updated. And I'll talk a little bit more about it, the Stormwater Comprehensive Plan soon. But I'd like to talk first about the infrastructure status for the city. So the state of the stormwater utility currently is improving. We definitely have clear guidelines from Ecology on what we need to do for our inspection and cleaning. And they can be simply summarized in these 3 bullet points here. But historically, the city's been more or less reactive to maintenance repairs. It's here gets away from being reactive and it focuses on evaluating and testing the system condition by developing a rating for each asset that we inspect and then setting a schedule based on the age or condition of that asset. Our new TV truck and our new Vector, have really been helpful for us. We've really been able to holistically inspect, troubleshoot, and diagnose problems or needs in this system. Many of these are underground that we previously weren't able to really track down and identify. The camera truck has really helped us with that. As the city moves towards an integrated asset management program, all of this information will assist our staff in making informed decisions about prioritizing needed projects. Surface water management component. So many of the issues within the city arise from rain events and stormwater runoff that aren't necessarily associated with brick and mortar type utilities. This picture shows an example of a creek that because of an exceptionally rainy winter, the road prism began to erode and of the adjacent street next to the creek. City crews were able to temporarily bypass that creek around the failure and install an engineered log and rock revetment to protect the road prism, minimally affecting the stream. In 2020, repairs were made to 3 areas within the city that were affected by inclement weather. There are some that still need to be scheduled, but they will most likely be occurring in 2021. The 3 that we completed in 2020 were the pedestrian pathway bridge repair at McCormick, which is scheduled to be done in a couple weeks here once we get the materials on staff. Horseman Heights is another one that we're backlogged for materials on, but it will be completed before the end of the year. And the Bay Street pedestrian pathway repair down near the high tide? I always say it wrong. Across the street from the Blue Goose downtown there, right along the pathway right near where it ends. Our crews were able to repair some damage due to stormwater and tidal influences that occurred there. So on to our dam safety program. The McCormick Ridge Dam was inherited by the city in 2009 from Kitsap County. We have 3 registered dams with the Department of Ecology within city limits, but McCormick Ridge is the only one that is publicly owned. The McCormick Ridge Dam is classified as a high hazard dam due to the location of a Bremerton housing development downstream of the spillway. The city conducts annual inspections of this site and maintains the dam as required by the Dam Safety Office of Ecology. We needed to conduct engineering and survey work on this facility because the dam was identified with some updates that were needed beyond the capacity of city staff, such as geotechnical assessments, et cetera, due to this change in the categorization of the dam. So we've contracted with Goldsmith to conduct the work needed to assess and update the dam safety program that we have in place currently for McCormick Ridge Dam. There are some minor repairs that need to be conducted, but these repairs can be conducted by city staff for minimal dollars. Onto comprehensive planning. The Stormwater and Watersheds Comprehensive Plan is scheduled to be completed by 2022, and it will outline the steps needed to maintain permit compliance and pass that retrofits and redevelopment of aging stormwater infrastructure within the city, plan for future regional stormwater management facilities, and assess and manage watershed scale assets, refine a financial plan for the utility, and strengthen our CIP program. This plan will also provide modeling data for the pipe capacity, pollutant loading, and drainage for the entire city, emulating the results of our currently active storm that's being conducted by Reed Middleton and geoengineers. The plan will be tailored to meet the requirements of our permit, as well as all the needs of the city for growth and expansion. We have just in 2019 and 2020. We finished up with the Tremont stormwater improvements. We are currently in the process of completing the downtown stormwater basin study. And at the beginning of the 2019 year, we finished the Annapolis Creek Culvert 30% design. We're working to try and get funding to continue with the Annapolis Creek Culvert to 100% design, but that's currently dependent upon legislative funding allocation for Recreation and Conservation Office dollars. Future capital activities that are upcoming. The Biennial Stormwater Capital Project list for 21 and 22 includes 5 major projects, 60% of which require grant funding to initiate. Of these projects, 3 are design build culvert replacements, 1 is for a regional stormwater management park, and the final project is for property acquisition to build a major stormwater facility near Bethel and Salmonberry intersection, which that has recently been closed for purchase, I believe. So, yeah. Looking ahead through 2024, upon assessment from the comprehensive plan, we will be prioritizing our infrastructure retrofits and our water quality improvement plans throughout the city to inform our future capital improvement projects. Prioritize city enhancement, shoreline in the water. Are there any as a dam? Is it Elven Trails Mark? And the other dam is actually at the entrance to McCormick, where the walking path crosses over that beaver pond.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the definition of a dam under the dam safety program is that it has to have the ability to impound up to 10 acre-feet of water, and it has to be an above ground impoundment. So it's not a pond, it's something that's man-made to impede water from moving its normal pathway. And both of those meet that criteria. It was kind of complicated to get piloting certification for the drone program. We currently have 2 pilots testing. Inspector and Aaron one is so drone usually with observational oversight from another staff member, because there are certain requirements that we need to maintain visual connection with the unit. We have to normally walk through. That would be a significant portion of a day to conduct a thorough inspection. With this drone now, we can do it within 9 minutes. So it really changes and allows us to be able to compress our inspection program and visit multiple sites during the day rather than having to focus on 1 or potentially 2. So it's really been a way for us to streamline our processes and make more efficient use of our time when we're doing field work.
It also allows us to, through recording of the footage, we can easily, if we have a developer that says that, hey, I've got grass on this whole back area, but we don't need to go back there, we could, literally say, well, this footage shows that you're lying to us. So it's real-time information that we can then bring into the record as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Zach had a question. When you were talking about the capital project, are there any city funding to get them fixed or move forward?
My hope currently is to just really focus on securing that. And I would much prefer to get grant funding priority. Some of these are multi-million-dollar projects. Some of them are, the design project for Annapolis, we're estimating it at about $500,000 for completion. So that's a little more feasible. But, for something like South Sydney, we're looking at most likely with a potential of $12 million for the facility build out, rough estimate. So I would really prefer to use grant funding to pay for these types of projects if we can secure it. So
No, I understand that. emergency should the funds not be forthcoming?
No, there's some of them have match requirements, but they're usually reasonable and stuff that we can accommodate through our existing funds.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Other questions from the council? Well, thank you very much, Zach. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your time.
Is up with Building Board of Appeals.
Yes, and this is an item that the mayor had asked we put on the agenda for a brief. Every year he has to appoint new Building Board of Appeals members, and required to do that before the end of this year. However, the Building Board of Appeals, as long as I've been with the city, has never met. They've never been asked to hear a appeal, and we don't have any procedure set up for them. If they had to meet, we would be improvising our way through any sort of process. And we have Code Pros as our building inspection consultant, and he is a certified building official. That's Mike Barth. And so I've been working with him to review the required IBC code adoption. And that was one of the suggestions that he made that we take is related to a examiner before ordinance that would act. And so and add about feel free.
Don't I think
Fund is never used. It's a system that is much better to have in place and probably won't cost us a lot of money.
I agree. I also think it makes sense to land this with the hearing examiner. That's a quasi judicial action, and it makes sense to have that.
Right. We have February line, and so I'm not sure whether we will bring this forward as part of the building code adoption or try to do additions on the Building Board of Appeals open for a month and I don't know, hope that we don't have a building appeal. I'll have to talk to the attorney about the best course of action there.
Anything else for the good of the order? I see Mr. Crocker is with us. Yes, Mr. Diener.
Nick, you sent an email out last week, I think it was, about the county passing a companion ordinance on the roundabout at Old Clifton and Anderson. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what that means. I think I understand it, but I want to be clear.
Yeah, so there's an annexation provision for taking right-of-way that is in the county and annexing it to the city without going to the Boundary Review Board. And so we passed our ordinance that would annex that property in July, but it also required the county to take action. And so the county took a little bit longer than us to get it before the Board of Commissioners, but they did ultimately approve it, I guess a week ago, Monday. And so we just now have to record the ordinances to make the annexation of that right-of-way effective. And that just removes one more barrier for constructing the roundabout at Anderson Hill Road. Previously, without the annexation, we would have had to get permits from the county and from the city. And it would have been the city spending money in the county. And so this makes the project much cleaner. I think you could have also done the project by interlocal agreement, but I think this is the better outcome.
Thank you.
It was a good meeting tonight and a lot of questions. I think that Mr. Bond has some work to do on getting out information, requesting more information on the sub-area plan. And please get your comments to him also so he can gather those together.